everybody, and welcome back to the Awakening Cast. I am Jeremy, your host today, and today is going to be an awesome episode. We are going to be talking all about dungeon mastering. So if you have any interest in being a dungeon master, this is the episode for you. But do not worry, because next week we're going to talk all about players, and it's going to be super exciting. So if you're new and you're wanting to know how to play D&D or are curious about being a dungeon master, stay tuned, listen. You might get a nice behind the scenes look at what it's like to be a dungeon master. And today is kind of a special episode because we have our very first guest. So, please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Kendra.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. This is a first for me, so it's pretty fun.
Kendra and I have played in D&D games since 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while, and there's been numerous one-shots, campaigns, a couple different RPGs, mainly D&D though, for sure.
So today we're going to be talking all about our different dungeon master styles. So Kendra, can you give our listeners a quick intro about how you got into D&D?
Yeah, sure. I remember hearing about D&D when I was, a teenager, that kind of thing, but I'd never played, and I didn't know anybody that played that I knew of.
Yeah.
And then one of my friends really wanted to play with myself and another one of our friends. And she had played as a kid with her dad and sister. But it had been many years that she hadn't played since advanced D&D. So it had been a minute.
Okay, been a hot minute.
Yeah. So that was my first experience with D&D is trying to play with those two friends in the woods in the middle of nowhere trying to create characters when we didn't have all the rules, and it was a complete disaster.
Okay.
It was terrible. We had accidentally created these edgelord characters that didn't want to do anything or talk to anybody, so we just sat there waiting for something to happen. And yeah, so we put pause on the whole D&D thing until we got back to town. And that was when I started playing D&D with you. And that was my first experience with D&D that actually got going.
Yeah.
And also it was a full campaign. We played Curse of Strahd.
So much fun.
And
well, we technically never finished it.
No.
We had one more session left.
I have started Curse of Strahd, I think 5 times now.
And have never finished it.
Oh, no.
No. I think that's the actual Curse of Strahd.
It's the true curse, for sure.
You'll never finish it. It always holds on to you, and it will never let go and be like, when am I going to finish one?
Yeah. Which, it's been fun every time.
Oh, yeah.
So, win-win, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, so with that, I'm really excited about this episode to get more in depth into more conversations. So grab your Dungeon Master Manual and let's jump right into this episode. Welcome to episode 5, The Inquisitive Dungeon Master, featuring my friend Kendra.
Hey.
Today is going to be a little bit different, as it's going to be just Kendra and I chatting today all about the differences between our dungeon mastering, what got Kendra into being a dungeon master, and it's going to be even some of my experience as a dungeon master so that we can get kind of how different being a dungeon master is from person to person. So if you want to join the conversation and you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment below. Otherwise, you can join our growing Discord server and we can have a conversation live in there. So with that, let's start chatting. How did you first get into being a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons?
I was trying to think about this the other day, and I can't actually remember what made me really want to try. I think it was just that I had been playing D&D for maybe a year at some point.
Okay.
COVID happened.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I decided, you know what? I know the game well enough to start thinking that at least I like I said, I wanted to try.
Yeah.
So I started with a little one shot. I don't know if you've played A Wild Sheep Chase.
No.
But it's a pretty popular one, and
Okay.
it's so much fun.
Oh.
It's really silly.
Okay. What's that
And
about?
It's about a wizard has been turned into a sheep, and he wants help from the party. And there's a bed dragon. It's silly and a lot of fun.
Okay.
So I of course went all out. I pre-made characters for everybody, and they had to reach into a bag and pull out a stone with a symbol on it, and that was their character. And there was props for everyone. So we had a wizard with a wand and all that kind of stuff. So it was a ton of fun. And I mean, I don't think anyone's experience with DMing goes perfectly,
No, definitely
but
not.
I had a great group of friends and everybody had fun. So, I mean, that's the main thing. And yeah, I've tried DMing a couple of longer campaigns now. I did Dragon of Icespire Peak.
Oh, fun.
And then right now I've started trying to do my own full homebrew campaign in World, which is a very different
experience.
beastie.
Yeah. Especially when you have like pre-made modules around and you're like, okay, I have something to write it off. And then now homebrew, like I don't know, I feel like there's something special with homebrew.
There really is. And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here. I know that you love to take pre-written things and then homebrew the living
Shit out of it.
out of them.
Yeah.
I actually find the the pre-written campaigns to be a little bit not necessarily stifling, but anxiety inducing because it's like, well, I don't know. Am I supposed to do that? Which of course that's not intellectually. I know that that's not actually what matters, and that's not the point.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get past that. And then with homebrew, it's kind of like, oh well,
It's my world.
my players decided to do this instead. Well, now there's a town over here, and it instead of whatever it is I planned originally.
Yeah.
And hey, it really opens things up, and I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, because like I find with homebrew especially, there's something about it that when you start running like a homebrew, you look at playing Dungeons and Dragons way differently than through a module. Because I find with a module, you're just on that track. But with homebrew, you're just like, well, they're doing this. I have this plan. Oh, like this is part of the story. I'll just take that part of the story and put it where they're going. And and then it's like, oh yeah, that was meant to be there. And the players don't know otherwise. Yeah.
I mean, even with pre-written, like I said, I played a few times now, so I have some idea of what's actually in the book of Curse of Strahd.
Yes.
But any time when I was a player, I didn't know what was out of the book and what was what the DM was throwing in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so then that kind of, you saying that, so like when you start playing with me as a dungeon master for the first time, so your understanding of the rules, like that was completely different than what you know now.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I think you did a really good job of making sure that we understood kind of the basic rules, and then there was a certain amount of the squishability for the just so that the game wouldn't get super bogged down with flipping through the book and explaining rules, and it was about the story, not the rules. I think it was 3 years later before I actually understood how druid spells work.
Instead of just like, oh, well, we're just all having fun at the table, whatever, just like, let's just go with it.
Yeah, I knew that I had my spell slots and a druid spell list, but I didn't understand that I was supposed to prepare a certain amount per day and how I was supposed to figure out how many to prepare per day. It was not game breaking. Especially because, we were pretty new players, so it was all pretty vanilla as far as, you know, our character interactions and madness.
Honestly, yeah, because like I find when I ran that game for the three of you, like I just didn't want to overwhelm you with all the rules. Like I obviously wanted to like teach the basics, because I find when it comes to new players, like when you overwhelm with so many rules, that's just like, oh, we're pausing the game, flip, flip, flip. There's just this immersion break that happens. Yeah, for sure. So, but like when playing with more advanced, like now that you know more rules and they know more rules, when we actually sit down at the table on our monthly game, it's more like, okay, let's I know we know the rules, like, so let's actually like do it. Even though yes, I feel like I still am focused.
The rule of cool applies.
Yes, because like I feel like that's an important thing as a dungeon master, and even for like players to recognize, is there are rules. The basics are so important, and getting those basics down are very much needed. But once you have learned the rules and even more advanced rules through Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like that's when the rules become more like guidelines.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think any D&D player knows 100% of the rules. There's a lot of rules, and some of them basically never come up.
Yeah.
But if you know the basics, and if everybody understands the mechanics of their class and that kind of thing, the game goes so much smoother.
Yeah.
Now, you're always going to run into situations that there aren't really rules for, which is when you want the players to say, hey, I want to do this, and tell them what they want to do, and then the DM decides what that means in terms of dice.
Exactly.
And it's actually a bit of a pet peeve of mine when people say things like, I roll perception. It's,
okay.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Okay.
What's going on here? Tell me what are you doing?
Yeah. Instead, so like in this instance, it's just like they're taking matters into their own hand instead of, hey, Dungeon Master, do you think I could roll a perception check to see what's in the room? Or like, I noticed you described a picture. Can I do a perception check? Like, I feel like that's okay, but what you're describing seems different.
To me, it's not so much about taking it out of my hands. It's breaking the third wall.
Okay.
So what I would prefer the player says is something along the lines of, that picture that you mentioned, can I look around there? I want to see if I can feel any air coming from behind it, see if there's any secret areas. And then I'd probably tell them to roll investigation.
Yes.
And then, or if it's something like, or do I hear anything? And then it would be roll a perception check.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because like that, I feel like that definitely puts the onus on the character or the character player to just be like, be creative instead of, I do perception check. For what? Stop. Why did you just roll?
Yeah. Why are you rolling? And to be fair, I often, as a player, will roll if I'm on the fence about a decision or something.
And I feel like that's totally okay.
But it's not like it's to do with what I am doing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But
yes.
But yeah, that's kind of the gist.
I want my players to have as much freedom as possible. So if they decide to go and check the picture, and they're like, I want them to describe what they're doing to like for the picture. So like feeling for that air, and then I'll let them know. Okay, do investigation. And I think we're very similar in that way then.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes if it is a little bit gray, it'll be roll investigation or perception, whatever is your preference.
Yeah.
It's just like I said, it's more about immersion and not breaking that third wall and that kind of thing. And just I find it to be
better storytelling at the table if it's about the actions of the characters and not what's on your sheet necessarily.
Yeah. So then, like, what are some rules that like you tend to strictly adhere at the table that is specifically you?
That's a good question. Overall, I'd say I'm much more rules heavy than you are. I like going by the rules and really having that framework. I don't know if there's rules that I wouldn't bend.
Okay. So you feel like you're a lot more rigid with the rules?
I definitely tend to play more with the rules, and then there's certain exceptions. I definitely have a lot of I have a list of potential homebrew that I sent to my players before we started this homebrew campaign of mine.
Yeah.
Kind of saying like, hey, any of these interest you? And that kind of thing. But the foundation is the rules as written.
Yeah.
No, I think everybody's like that to an extent.
It's
just where that line is I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I don't know.
Because, like, I feel like I'm very lax with rules at my table. And I think this is where the biggest difference between you and I as a dungeon master is. Because, like, I'm very much, okay, the story's, like, unfolding right now, and I don't want rules to stop this. Like, I don't want it to be like, oh, shit, like, if somebody wants to fire off a spell during this, like, intense scene, like, I don't want to hold that back. I want to see how this unfolds. I want to see the dice roll. You don't have a spell slot for that? Like, for me, I would bend that rule a little bit, because it's just like, okay, so you cast that, or you overcast that. Okay, so you're going to have some sort of fatigue. So, like, I kind of look at the rules and I go, okay, what's a way that I can bend it in a way where the players are allowed to do it? They don't have the spell slot, but I'm going to, like, have them have overcast, maybe a level of exhaustion. So, like, that's because, like, I really want things to flow, especially in scenes. Like, for instance, was it already, like, a week ago since we had our session?
I mean, like 5 days, but
5 days. Okay. Man, it feels like it was just like the other day.
Yeah. I actually haven't left your basement. I've just been here the whole time.
Like, the whole, when Cressida and everybody was, like, running to find Cressida's dad, like, where did he go? And then you see that there is, so, like, you see the stepmom, like, in the alley, just hunched over, and it was you who decided to try grabbing that weird lizard imp thing, right?
Cressida said, grab him.
Oh, yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
And then you had me roll for that.
Yeah.
And I think I got a dirty 20 or something.
Yeah. So you just managed to like catch that slippery bugger. But, like, it's like things like that where, like, the scene's going so fast, and like, grappling is definitely a rule in it. And, like, I think this is, like, one of those things for me where because grappling is, like, I always somehow forget how grappling works.
It's awkward.
It's like, it's always something that I feel like clogs up a game, grappling. Because it's a contesting thing where I do dex, you do a strength, or you do a dex and I do a strength, or something like that.
Yeah, like, it almost feels like there's a bunch of action, and then all of a sudden the player, the characters sit down and start having a thumb war. Like, that's kind of the feel of it. Yeah. And I totally agree. And I think that comes down to the dungeon master deciding when to call for initiative. Yeah. Whereas, things, sure, a grapple or whatever it is doesn't necessarily, like, can be part of combat, but in this case, It wasn't.
No.
I think, actually, now that I think of it, I think probably where I'm the most rigid is probably during combat.
Okay, yeah.
And, action economy and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I first started DMing, I was definitely much more likely to kind of massage those hit points a bit, and because I was afraid of killing all my characters.
Okay, yeah,
player characters.
Yeah.
And then one of them did die, and I went, oh, that was fine.
Yeah.
And then it was my partner and a friend of ours, and they bought me a Hero Forge mini of that character in like a prone lying down.
I love that. That's fantastic.
So that was a pretty genius move on their part, but yeah, I killed Bjorn.
Okay, so yeah, because like I find outside of combat, there are some rules, but I feel like the majority of the rules are in combat.
Yeah, I think D&D really shows its wargaming past when it comes to the rules, because there's lots of rules in there, but it's so combat heavy. The real mechanics of D&D are really in combat, and even though D&D itself, especially in 5th edition, has become much more narrative.
Yes. Yeah, because I tried to keep my combat very cinematic as much as possible, instead of your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn, and it just goes around the table and it's like, okay, we did it.
Yeah.
So like, I know a big thing that I've been trying to do is like conversations within combat. Sometimes they can be lengthy. Sometimes it's like, we're having this full conversation, but 6 seconds. It's like, no, you can't have that full conversation. But like, in the sense that I'm just like, okay, well, it is cinematic. Let's like try focusing more on the actions. If there is conversation, let's limit it down to a sentence.
Yeah, which I think is super reasonable, and I'm definitely the same way. Anytime you get exchanges happening in combat, it's like, I don't think so. Yeah, maybe one person says something, the other person responds with a few words. But that's probably the limit for me for most of the time. Yeah.
See, I feel like the exception for me is like, let's say you're facing the big bad and your party is like pretty much on their last legs. Everybody's like really pulling together. It's you, big bad. And so there's like that time of like, okay, we're having a conversation. Yeah, we're still in initiative, but like we have that cinematic moment of like, there's this conversation going on, but like that's taking those extra turns. So like initiative is essentially paused for a bit.
Yeah, like I think right at the beginning is maybe where exceptions could be made.
Yeah, because like I know with some encounters, like it doesn't always have to be fighting. It can be conversation.
Yes.
So if at the table someone decides to break from that conversation, the conversation round, then it's like, okay, now we're in combat. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's like one of those things that is going to vary from table to table.
Well, table to table and encounter to encounter. Yeah. I think it really depends on what the combat's about. You know, if they're in the middle of fighting, I don't know, like more of a beast or
like the four toads.
Then they're not going to stop just because you're talking to them. But if it's an enemy spellcaster, well, maybe things pause for a moment. And you don't necessarily say that, but there is a slight lull in combat, and then it continues. But I really do think it's probably an individual instance in that case.
Because for me, with so you're going to hear a little bit behind the scenes of how I do my combat. So gasp. So what I like doing is I like counting up hit points. So
I do that to avoid having to use subtraction.
Yeah. So for me, I actually do it in a way where I look at how combat's going, and I don't really change the stats of the monsters or anything. I just count up, and if combat is starting to slow down, nobody's really having fun with the combat, then okay, so they're bloodied or what have you. Then, I mean, they still have their max hit points, but they go slightly above or slightly below, and combat's going to a lull. I kind of take a judgment call of like, okay, let's end it now. Or, okay, they are like they are just taking out these monsters, and the combat is like going by so fast. I am actually going to add more hit points, as well as I will openly admit I do fudge some of my rolls. I didn't actually fudge. I think I fudged maybe 2 rolls that last session. Other than that, like
you were rolling terribly.
I was rolling like I was legit rolling horrible, and well, I feel like you were the only one rolling well. You got at least like I don't think I got a nat 20 that session, but I got like I think 3 dirty 20s. Yeah, something like that.
And then Claire's a lot of my other rolls were high, and then poor Claire kept rolling nat 1.
I know, right? And I rolled like a handful of them. Like, so like there's those frogs. Like I legit rolled 2 nat 1s. I'm like, okay, this is actually hilarious.
Ridiculous.
That okay, now they're like battling each other. Oh, the one swallowed the other one. Oh, okay.
All right, I guess that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of the dice.
Yes.
Right? It's the fact that nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen anyway, because we're all different humans with ideas of what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to predict exactly what's going to happen. And I find with D&D at the table, it's almost always more exciting than what you could have imagined.
Yeah, honestly, because it's just like, oh, you rolled something, you're like, oh, let's think of an outcome. Because, like, I know for me, like, I was very scared of chaos, like, just even knocking a player out. Like when, especially during our first games, like our first Curse of Strahd campaign, I actually like. I mean, that was like 3 years into me playing D&D, but there's still that part of me that was like, oh, like I don't want to kill their first characters ever.
Yeah, I feel like with new players, you have to be really careful.
Yeah,
and I would definitely be more likely to roll behind the screen, let's say, and with new characters, or new players, sorry. And then as they get more experienced and have made a few different characters, and they're not as completely attached to one of them, it definitely gets a little bit easier. Yeah,
it definitely does, because because even today, combat is probably my weakest point as a dungeon master. Like, I find that I'm still figuring out the flow of combat. I'm still trying to, like, figure out, because, like, the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook doesn't make learning combat easy, how to, like, choose the monsters.
No. I find that Xanathar's is decent. Source that way, because they do the combinations of monsters for different levels and that kind of thing. But it's a crapshoot.
It's hard.
Like, let's be honest.
8+ years and I'm still learning combat. Like, but like now, like if I accidentally like do too powerful of a combat, like there's gonna be maybe 2 wolves, let's say, that are a bit weaker. They're a bit mangy. Like, they're going to die quicker than the other ones. Oh no, okay, now it's balanced.
Well, and to be honest, if I have the time, I often do roll hit points for monsters.
Okay.
If I have a bunch of the same, just because I think it's fun.
See, I did it for the first time last session.
Oh yeah.
So the frogs, so that's why one of those frogs was like, the toads were like huge. Because I rolled high for their hit points.
Oops.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Yeah.
But it does mean that even if you have super experienced players who are going, that's a wolf, it's still not exactly that many hit points, which I do like avoiding that. Now in the campaign that I'm homebrewing, everybody is tiny, and I've re-sleeved pretty much all the creatures. So yeah, sure, that was a giant scorpion by stats, but in reality, I renamed it something from a generator, and like just described a scorpion to like an AI, and it made a picture of like some fluffy purple thing.
Yeah.
So that was what they fought. It's been a lot of fun, and it kind of is that high fantasy sort of feel, because they don't necessarily recognize everything.
Yeah. I mean, and that's also kind of nice with players who don't recognize everything, because like I've played with some people who are way more experienced that like 15 plus years, and they know every monster in the monster manual. It's just
which I don't get, because my brain does not work that way.
I know, right?
So if you wanted to ask me what a goblin's AC was, I don't know.
Yeah, let me look it up for you.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, and if you were a dungeon master, you really had to memorize those stats so that it doesn't bog down things. Like, I could never.
Yeah,
my ADHD would not allow me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of the upsides to playing digitally, is you can prepare tokens and stat blocks and that, and then you just click the thing that says bite, and and the creature attempts to bite.
And it's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like there's also just like, I feel like we're in an age where technology is kind of taking over, and like there's so many helpful tools, but there's also just something so nice about rolling physical dice.
Yeah.
And like having the sheets of paper to keep track of combat or like encounters and characters, because I don't know, I love the tactile.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I love my dice. I like to roll them.
Yeah. Like, because like I've played a lot of my games online, and my big thing is, you spent money on these beautiful rocks called dice. Please use them. Yeah. Like, I trust you. Even if you do fudge, I don't care. You're like, because like if I'm playing online and a character decides to fudge their rolls, that's on them, because then that means they're breezing by. Is that really all that fun?
Yeah, it's
like, I mean, so that's the onus on them.
Cheating's not fun.
No, it really isn't, because like I'm thinking, okay, if the player is cheating, it's just like I'm just going, and I know when you're cheating. Like there is like, you're as a player. So this is like kind of like some player advice. If you are tempted at cheating, the DM's going to know. Don't try to hide it. And you're honestly taking a lot of fun out of playing D&D, because like it's the chance, it's the like if you're cheating and you're like rolling natural 20s, like it makes them feel less special.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like we were talking about earlier, where you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And sure, you might roll really terrible for a few rounds and be down to 1 hit point, and then you just roll really well, and that monster's on its last hit point too, but you didn't know, and you take it down, and you're almost dead yourself, and that can't happen if you just always succeed and your AC magically climbs to 20, and all those things. And I know as a brand new player, I was a lot more tempted to cheat.
Okay, yeah.
And I honestly can't remember if I did or not. I may have. But that's because I feel like new players especially don't really understand the real beauty of the story of chance. And they also don't understand that you can't lose D&D.
No, you really can't.
Worst case scenario, you have an epic death scene.
Exactly. And like what I'm starting with mine is, your character dies, get a free action to do whatever the fuck you want.
And I think that's great.
Yeah, because like this is your character's last moments of their life. And if they're not going out on just this big moment of saving the other fellow characters, or like they're sacrificing themselves so that they can do a lot more damage to the big bad or what have you. Like, it's just this moment that, like, I can't wait for it to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but like, I'm excited for whenever that happens. Whenever Chance decides to take out Cressida, Sarnmendi, and Fabian, like, and I'm excited to see what you three do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's very possible, and it'll be epic should it happen. And we all love making characters. So again, worst case, you have an epic death, and then you get to make a new character.
Oh no, exchange student comes onto campus.
Exactly.
Favio,
my twin brother, with a different haircut.
Yes, and also a fighter instead of.
Hey, who knows?
Who knows? How do you deal with improvisation?
I'd say for larger scale, I don't tend to plan anything really more than a session or two in advance. Other than I have some ideas of where things could go, but it's definitely not solid.
Okay.
Now, obviously, this is in my own homebrew campaign, not when I was doing a module, but in terms of more in the moment things, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I definitely am more likely to go with the rule of cool if it's something completely unexpected. And, I'm definitely not going to, for example, look up the rules of grapple if I was not expecting a grapple. It would just, you just think of something to roll, and if you think it would be at all possible. Because of course, if it's just no, then the answer is just no.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah. But that's a tricky question. It really depends. And but that is where I think the rules sometimes get bent or changed, because
it's like kind of on the fly.
Yeah, and sometimes the players come up with really cool stuff.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's better than what I thought of.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go down this train of thought.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes players will ask questions about things that, of course, you haven't prepared, because that's just how it goes. But as I gain more experience DMing, you start coming up with things and learning what things you as an individual need to prep. For me, names. I am terrible at coming up with names on the fly. If you want a description, anything like that, I'm usually pretty good. But if it's a name, it's just, you'll end up with 5 dwarves named Kyle. I don't know.
I honestly, I relate to that so much, where I have had players be like, I'll be like, oh yeah, there you see a couple strangers just walking down the road. Oh, I go up to them. What's their name? Like they're always the most generic names. Like,
this is Sam.
This is Elizabeth. This is Fred. This is Frank. Like, they are going to be also the whitest names. Like Bob.
For sure.
Yeah, like I struggle with that. Like, I know this is something I know I need to get better at. Like, this is where, like, I need to, behind my DM screen, to have a list of names just there, just in case that happens.
Yeah.
And I need to actually actively think about that before a session. Do I do it? No. Have I thought about it? Yes.
It's multiple times. Yeah, same.
Yeah, but that's a huge struggle. Or like, I know this is also going to be like kind of in the same vein. Like, they go into a building, like they go into a tavern. Oh, what's the name of the tavern?
The Boar's Tankard.
Yeah. Like, for me, because like it's me, I want it to be the most chaotic name and most punny name. So like,
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to think of that on the fly.
Oh,
that's
on the
for
fly?
sure.
No. But like I sometimes I'll be like, give me 1 second to think of a name. I will, and then I'll be like, okay, what's something fun? So like, Johnny Jim's. Or like I will sometimes like play off real restaurant names or real tavern names and just kind of put a fantasy spin on it because our minds are rooted in reality. We know things in this reality.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just be like, Meapolds.
Yeah, exactly.
Meapolds Tavern.
Yeah, well, it's like in another campaign that I was playing, we were in a city and there was this coffee shop chain and there was one on every corner and it was called Fools and Goats, which was a play off of Fools and Horses, which is a coffee shop at the Forks.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of a mix of Fools and Horses and Starbucks, and my character was a fighter who always got the most whipped cream covered sprinkled and drizzled thing that he could manage. But it's fun for the players when those little tidbits are worked in, so why not lean into it?
Exactly, because I find that's a little bit of the fun about being a dungeon master.
Yeah,
like especially if you're like new and wanting to be a DM, like this is some of the things that like you can have fun doing. Like you can actually also make up your own rules.
Yeah,
like I actually early on into like I have rarely been a player, but the few times that I have, one of my fellow players at that table decided, hey, can I DM a session? And so we're like, yeah, do it.
Hell yeah.
And so it was so fun. They're like, okay, so it's a winter wonderland, and they decided to make out of cardboard these little snowmen and made little snowballs. And they're like, okay, here's the rule of the game. And we physically had to do it at the table.
That's pretty great.
And it was so much fun because they were still really new at D&D. So they're like, well, I don't know the rules, so I'm just going to make up my own rules for this game.
Fantastic.
And like, honestly, that's something that like I want to do more is like get out of that the convention of regular rules and just be like, you know what? I'm going to do this new game, and I don't know if you realized what I was doing with the summer camp.
Probably not.
Okay, so you know how we did the Alice is Missing?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm setting up for Alice is Missing. Spoiler for you guys.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's gonna be fun.
Nice.
I'm super excited.
Game within a game.
Yeah.
Gameception.
Yeah. So it's like things like that where I have thought about where I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we're playing 5th edition, but like I also want to like add other kind of games in. Because like that one time with that friend who just like totally made this little mini game, it was just like honestly it was a little bit of an inspiration for me because I'm like, why don't we as like DMs who are just not stuck in our ways, but it's just like, oh yeah, this is how the game is played.
Yeah.
And like then it's just like, no, like why don't we just like get out of the rules a bit? Let's get out of the game a bit and do something fun like that because like I feel like those are very memorable times.
Yeah, well, and whatever works at your table, right? Like some people really want a super crunchy, gritty game. They want to be able to know the rules and rely on the rules. And some people can never be bothered to remember a single rule and just fly by the seat of their pants at all times. Most people are in the middle.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of figuring out where you collectively are at the table and having fun. Like it's about storytelling with your friends, right?
Honestly. Yeah, because like I feel like that's very important is like session 0, setting the expectations of the game.
Yes, definitely.
And see what all your players want at the table. Because like I know with Claire, she's definitely like very rigid. She's very rigid. She's
Mm-hmm.
just like, this isn't making any sense. I know it's fantasy, but like,
But your architecture, Jeremy.
yeah, like there's things that like I know she struggles with my DMing style specifically because I am so free with a lot of things, and because I'm like, well, it's fantasy. It's not really rooted in reality.
Yeah.
We're trying to get away from reality. Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's some things that's like, yes, rooted in reality of like, obviously we have 2 legs, we walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like that makes sense. Carrying capacity, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's some things like that I brought into our new monthly game that I know Claire really enjoys and really is just like, well, I want those material components. I want to have the cumbersome. No,
Encumbrance.
yeah. Like that's something she wants. So like I'm listening to each player and I'm like, okay, what do you want? Okay, I'm going to add it in the game for you because that's what you enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as it's not something that somebody else actively dislikes,
Yes.
in which case there needs to be a conversation.
Exactly.
Just add it in.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
And like I feel like this is with DMs and players, like players, if there is anything that you're just something's not clicking with the DM and you're just like, oh, I want a bit more of this.
Yeah.
Honestly, talk to your dungeon master. We love to listen. We love to make sure that you're having fun at the table.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we all want to have fun. We all want to like play this game, enjoy each other's company, laugh, have fun. And if someone wants more realism in it, just like, okay, let's bring some more realism in. Because I know Claire talked about last session and she was like, well, they're like, Cressa's dad went missing and then there was a weak jump and it's just like, oh, we just kind of went on our merry way with just like, where's our dad? And I am going to address that in our next session because like Claire did bring up a good point because in the moment of the game as a dungeon master, it's just like you get so swept up, and especially me, I'm very improvisation heavy. Like I prep, but there's some things that's just like I know there's a story beat of your family's 3 houses are intertwined somehow. I'm not going to go into super spoilers, but like having in my mind, I'm going, okay, this makes sense narratively for me because I knew that I wanted one of your family members to go missing, like an important head, and so I saw a option and I took it. So I'm like, ooh, this is perfect for a story beat that I want to do to cover later.
Right.
But in the moment, I may not have done it well enough.
I don't know if it was necessarily that it wasn't done well enough, but maybe there could be something like a week is passing. What, if anything, are you doing to try and figure out where I can't remember his name, but Cressida's father, where he's gone, and then if there isn't really anything specific or we get past that, then it's like you spend the week, trying to call him every day. You send letters to some of his associates. No one's heard from him.
Yeah.
The deans and adults aren't listening.
Yeah. And it just seems very strange.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, in the moment, everything is very heavy and very in the moment that you kind of don't think of these things until after, especially if you talk to your players. And then you go, oh, you know what? Let's bring this up.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very important as a DM to not let that ego really take hold of like, no, like there's a purpose for this. Like you don't be questioning it. It's like, no, like they're bringing this up for a reason and you should listen because it's just like, oh, you know what? That's a really good point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
So like, that's something that I do want to bring to our table because I'm like, yeah, like I'm very much open and like, okay, yeah, I messed up. Like, let's do a rewind or what have you, or let's talk about what happened during that week outside of game or just before the game. Hey, so during that week, what you were exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. I also think that sometimes, and it does depend on the players. Like I know Claire definitely plot holes like that really bug her.
Yes.
For me, I tend to go, well, this is a fantasy story I'm telling with my friends. We'll just gloss over that and keep moving.
Yeah.
So it does depend on the players.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people, it is a matter of making sure people don't feel railroaded.
Yes.
You know, that R word in the hobby.
I would say, okay, so since you brought railroading, so for me, if you're a seasoned DM, don't do it.
No.
But if you're a brand new DM, it's your first session, literally tell the players at the table and say, hey, is it okay if we railroad a bit because like I'm still new and I kind of want to like get a hold of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think doing as a new DM doing a linear story is really important. And that's how it was for me doing Dragon of Icespire Peak. It's a very basic module in that you go into town and there's a quest board.
Yes.
And the players can decide which quest to do. At one point, they were talking about maybe going into the next town, and I was kind of like, okay. And I was going to let them, but it was just going to be a whole bunch of improvisation and roll tables.
Yeah.
Which would have been fine, but they quickly went, oh, she doesn't have that prepared. Never mind. So... I think as a new DM... It's always the matter of what do you consider to be railroading.
Yeah, that's fair.
If it's okay, we're gonna go talk to this person. They don't know anything. You keep going. Instead of, let it play out. Let them role play.
Yeah, that's true.
And then, or maybe instead of this clue being over here, and they didn't go over there. Well, now that person that they're going to talk to has the clue. It's not, it's, some people consider that to be railroading because it's kind of, you will find the clue no matter what. But if that's what's necessary to advance the story, then that's what's needed to advance the story. Where I think it's a problem is where you start basically telling players, no, you can't do that. And not for any in-game reason, but just because
you don't like it.
You don't like it, or you didn't have it prepared. Now, it's totally reasonable, especially as a new DM, to say, hey, I don't have that prepared.
Yes.
Can you go into the other shop instead? Because presumably you're playing with your friends.
Yes.
And they want you to have a good time too.
Yeah.
So...
yeah.
I think things like linear storytelling and railroading, if you are playing with your close friends and you have a good relationship, it's a lot easier than, RPG horror stories and such online.
Oh my God.
Would have you think.
Yeah. I don't know. Railroading is just, if it can be avoided, avoid.
And I think when you're playing with new players, having a more linear story is better also. So it works really well for a new DM, and it also works really well for new players because new players tend to have more of a video game mentality where it's,
very much so.
What am I supposed to do next? Where is the next quest point on the minimap? And,
oh my God.
That kind of thing. So, and being told they can go anywhere.
What?
Well, that's overwhelming.
Well, yeah, because that's too many options. Yeah. But then then they get used to it and they're like, oh, I can do anything.
I'm gonna do this, and you go, okay,
yeah,
sure,
yeah, because I think that's the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons is, you come up with whatever you want in your mind, you roll to see if you can do it, and it's like, I can do it.
maybe,
Maybe we'll see if I can do it. And I think that really is the beautiful thing about D&D and why we love it so much is that as players, as DMs, we really can imagine these things and have them happen.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just such a cool game.
It's great. I know there's been a lot of not so great publicity for D&D in recent years, but the game is great, and I love it, and I have fun playing it.
With that being said, it's like if you are someone who wants to be that dungeon master, or you're a player who's curious on this behind the scenes, and this was enlightening to any of you, if you have any questions, like we'd love to answer those in the Discord, so feel free to join. And yeah, just keep pursuing that imagination, like being creative. Don't hold yourself back.
Oh yeah.
As a DM, if you are new or experienced, what are things that help you with resource-wise that you can share with those around us, as well as what made you start to be a dungeon master or start thinking about being a dungeon master? Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Awakencast. If you enjoyed our chat, be sure to check out our website at theawakencast.com for more content. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at The Awakencast for updates and behind the scenes fun. And if you want to dive deeper and connect with fellow adventurers, you absolutely don't want to miss joining our amazing Discord community. It is where the real magic happens. Exclusive content, live discussions, and a chance to shape the future of episodes. I'm your host, Jeremy, reminding you to stay curious, stay kind, and keep being awesome. Until next time, happy adventuring.